Thank you so much, Ben, Jacob, for joining, and everyone else joining today on our webinar. I'm going to do a quick introduction, a few housekeeping items for today's webinar, and then I'm going to introduce our brilliant speakers today. I've known Ben now for almost a year, I want to say, that we've been working together. I don't know. It feels like it's been 10, but and then I know. And then Jacob, we just got a chance to meet at VRMA a few months back. So I'm really excited to share your story as well, because I saw so many parallels with Ben's and an interesting kind of move for future readying the short-term rental business. So my name is Francois. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Enzo Connect, a guest experience platform for the vacation rental industry. Our mission is simple. We're here to help digitize and monetize every guest interaction in this industry. So today we're going to explore the essence of a future-ready business in the dynamic world of short-term rentals. What does it take for a company to not just survive, but thrive in any situation, especially by scaling up for future opportunities? We're going to dive into a few critical questions that both Jacob and Ben are going to share their points of views on. We're going to talk a bit more about data. This is a huge subject these days, especially with the sort of proliferance of AI and how you store this information and where you have all of this data so that you can control your own business. And we're going to learn from their experiences and strategies to transform your own business model or your own business into a model of adaptability and growth in this ever-changing landscape of short-term rentals. So a few key points as to what we're going to learn today: how to integrate all of this different tech together. I know there's an overwhelming amount of technology out there. When I see the graphs shared by Wheelhouse and AJL, I'm like, and then I don't even know what to do. There's just so much choice out there. So just kind of figuring out how to pick different tools, connect them, and so on. Discover how going beyond basic digital presence can set your business apart, especially in such a crowded marketplace. Understand the importance of rapid decision-making and the adaptability in responding to these market changes and customer needs. And of course, exploring strategies for developing a robust business model that can withstand any sort of economic fluctuations, maybe even a COVID. I don't know. Well, let's not bring that back. Let's leave that in the past. That's 2020. Let's get started. So we're going to start with a brief introduction. Ben, do you want to give us a little introduction on Minty Living, yourself, and your path to building Minty Living?
Absolutely. And certainly thank you for having me, Francois, and Jacob. It's great to see you again as well. It's great to be here. So a very little bit about my background. I came from a very far distance from the world of vacation rental management and hospitality, cut my teeth in the world of quantitative finance and algorithmic trading, and then found vacation rental management by way of my much better half and co-founder. And so we started Minty Living in April of 2020. We had 5 units under management. Our experience was really with development and flipping properties and turning them into furnished rentals. And since that time, we have created a very design and guest experience focused vacation rental manager with direct channel pipes built into the film and production industry. Atlanta is the 3rd largest hub of film and production in North America. And we've grown to about 180 units during that time period, and have put a substantial amount of brain cycles into the world of what is our technology stack and how do we really build a scalable platform as we grow.
Love it. I think you're being too humble. Let's just point out you went to Carnegie Mellon, if I'm not mistaken, right? Which is like by far the best university for anything tech related. I'm just going to put it out there. And then Atlanta is what, number 3, you said? So does that make Toronto number 1 in terms of the film industry?
Or
what?
It's really? LA, New York, Atlanta, and Toronto.
I call bullshit on that.
I'll send you the stats. It actually happened during COVID, just so you know, because we had a governor that I won't take any type of political sides around, but he was very much about keeping things open for business. And so it was during that time period that Atlanta had a huge boom in the amount of soundstage space that we built. And so production started building up permanent infrastructure here. So it is a very recent development. You are exactly correct about that.
I love that. Now, another amazing introduction, Jacob from Renjoy. Jacob, do you want to give us a little intro on yourself and the company?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us. Definitely did not go to Carnegie Mellon like Ben here. Definitely did not do any kind of quantitative trading or anything like that. I I have a very different approach to vacation rentals. I kind of came into it actually as a real estate investor first, similar to Ben flipping property, but doing all kinds of real estate investing. And then through that process, I met a couple of my co-founders, saw what they were doing with their short-term rentals, thought, wow, this is a gold mine. I got to do something here. So we banded together and formed Renjoy. That started end of 2021. So we, at the end of this year, will be about 160 units live. We do focus pretty heavily on tech as kind of a scalability thing, but our focus has been a lot more on how do we take care of property in a really seamless and effective way? Because as many of you may or may not know, with long-term property managers, they just have an abysmal track record of actually taking care of property in an efficient manner. And so we very much look to improve that track record.
Makes sense. Love these introductions, and efficiency is a huge part when you're managing such a variety of properties, and it's short term. Like everything's different. Every guest is different. Every owner is different. Everything's different. It's like mini decentralized hotels times 160. So I could understand the focus on efficiency. So we're going to talk a bit more about what makes a company future ready. How does this apply to the hospitality industry, and particularly in the current context? And so I'm going to bring up a little study by McKinsey that suggests the sort of three characteristics of a future ready company, which are who we are, how we operate, and how we grow. And I feel like both of you are going to embody this perfectly over the next couple of minutes. Another study from HBR is just looked at across different companies and figured that the most future ready ones were the ones that were looking to work with disruptors earlier on so they could really shape the innovative technologies to their liking, learn aggressively with a very strong viewpoint. And I feel like both of you have one when it comes to both data warehousing and how you operate in general. And of course, a high-speed sector where you can act fast. And the vacation rental industry is obviously a very fast-growing industry. So looking at this question of what makes a company future ready, we're going to start same kind of pattern. Ben, Jacob, Ben, what are your thoughts? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you brought up this idea of the amount of different guests, it's a lot of heterogeneity across the spectrum from the technology, from the different markets. You have urban focused markets versus vacation rental markets. And I think the first step is to get very clear on what it is that you're building. If your goal is to build a nice, profitable vacation rental management company with 30, 50, 75 units, then the decisions that you make are going to be fundamentally different than if you say, okay, great, I'm trying to build a vacation rental management company that gets the thousands of units. In the world of technology development, right, it's kind of this piece of technical debt and knowing that you're building something that you're going to have to go back and rewrite. So I think there's a huge element to this of getting clear about what you are building and then ensuring that you're optimizing towards that North Star as you build out your OKRs for your 3, 6, 12-month roadmap. From that perspective, I think it's absolutely critical that once you've defined what it is that you're building, you go through a pretty substantial technology due diligence process. At the end of the day, choosing the wrong technology can set you back months and months and months. This is an incredibly broad industry as a vacation rental manager. You have to deal with finance and accounting. Some people can just be, I'll be your co-host on Airbnb. Most of us are really integrating a full-blown trust accounting system. So finance and accounting is huge. Operational workflows become paramount because we live and operate in physical space by definition. Of course, booking, understanding your different channels and your demand sources, and of course, being able to understand your profitability metrics and your growth metrics. So it really is crucial to do your due diligence around the technology side as well.
100%. And how about yourself, Jacob? How would you answer that question in terms of that sort of what makes that future ready aspect, either for your company or in general, that you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo a lot of what Ben mentioned with starting with your end in mind. It's really, really, really important that you, as the leader of your company and your team, whether it's one person or 10 people or 100 people, that you have a really clear vision that you're going for that informs everything that you're building working backwards. Because one thing I would add to what Ben is saying is, let's say you are just a little regional vacation rental manager, your tech stack is going to be somewhat static. You're going to say, okay, if I want 100 units, here's the best, most efficient setup for having 100 units, and I'm just going to build that. But if you say, I want to be 1,000, I want to be multi-market, well, now you have to start there and be like, okay, what's the most efficient tech stack there? What is the crucial linchpin to that final product, which we'll get to, but it's data. And how do I work back there through stages? Because the tech products you need at 1,000 units is very expensive for the products you need at 10 units or 50 units. And so your actual product roadmap has to be working backwards from there and then changing your tech at stages. Because one of the things I would mention is that this industry is changing so fast. I mean, Francois, how long have you even been doing Enzo? I mean, it's a brand new company.
2.5, 3 years.
Yeah,
not
two
even yet.
2.5 years. And I would say that that's
Yeah.
true for maybe half the tech vendors
100%.
in the short-term rental space. I mean, a lot of new companies are coming out. And so one of the big things to make your company future or basically future ready is to be understanding of the fact that your tech stack is going to be fluid, and to make sure that you don't build something really rigid around how you do your actual work of management.
100%. I like it because you guys have brought up sort of two things that I look at from a SaaS perspective, which is figuring out who your ICP is, or sort of, sorry, your USP, your unique selling proposition, and focus. And focus being like, this is who we are, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to forget about all the other distractions, so that we can reverse engineer that end goal, whether it's a year-long end goal, a 5-year plan, whatever that is, and really just get to that stage. I find that in property management, sometimes it's easy to get distracted with new shiny objects all the time that don't actually push you towards that mission that you're after. Jacob, quick question. I'm going sidetrack here. By the way, this is what happens on my webinars in general. Whatever we planned ahead of time, there is going to be sidetrack questions. I should have warned you.
Love it.
I love jazz. It's improv time. Is there a specific type of guest that you target, Jacob?
You know, we don't. And actually, I think that's a really cool thing about what Ben does with his like really targeted, persona that he's going after. Yeah. I think there's a lot of really cool niches, not just on the properties you're managing, but even the guests you're serving. And we currently don't have that. We're very broad.
That's fair. That's fair.
And to that point, Francois, I think you bring up a great point, which is, yes, there's this element of direct booking with guests or finding direct niche channels. And I think something that we're just beginning to scratch the surface on is this concept of upsells as well. And so I think that's right. As a manager, and this goes back to the future-proof concept, you have to understand you essentially have a variable cost of running your business on a consistent basis. And so the more ways that you can identify revenue streams that are going to move either independently or even inversely to those same ebbs and flows are also extremely valuable as well.
100%. 100%. No, I appreciate that. And then, so we're going to look a bit more now. We've talked about the business structure and like what are some key elements to look at and focus on. Let's think a bit more about team, because I feel like people at the end of the day is what constitutes an amazing business. We just hired a new salesperson. We've got a new engineer coming out next week, a VP of operations who starts tomorrow, which I still have to figure out the onboarding for. And it feels like crazy times where we're bringing on all these people, but it's key, right? It's paramount to having the right people in the right positions. Talk to me a bit more about creating that future ready team. And let's actually switch it up and start with Jacob this time. Jacob, do you want to give us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends a lot on the roles that you're filling, but I would say some skills that we're always looking for, people who actually are somewhat tech savvy, and not so much as they're developers, but at least that they can navigate integrating, like you talk about onboarding, somebody who can navigate their own onboarding, right? Somebody who can figure out how to connect their Slack with their Google Calendar, with their, with their email, or whatever client they choose to use. Like somebody who's actually, when you're in a startup mode, you don't really have a formal HR or onboarding process. So somebody who's tech savvy is very much a big skill that we're looking for, because in addition, I mean, that's just a one-time thing, the onboarding, but as that person is responsible for these different metrics, whatever they may be, that's going to require them, we're a small team, that's going to require them to actually build in products. So each of our, full-time team members who's joining us is going to be building directly. We don't have like this middle tier of managers. And so having a good sense of how to navigate technology tools is really important for us. And then one other really big skill that we look for is somebody who is really process oriented and thinks about problems from the perspective of their stakeholder, whoever that may be, whether it's a client or it's somebody internal to our company, like a team member or a guest. They put themselves in their shoes. They think about the problem, and then, as we said earlier, start with the end in mind. They start with the problem in mind and work back to that solution. And so we always look for team members who are very focused on building kind of that systems or that project-based approach to problems.
I love that. It's a lot of reverse engineering that I'm hearing today,
Yes.
whether it's the company goals or the team or everything. So I'm loving to hear this. How about yourself, Ben? What does that look like for you? Because I've interacted with your team quite a bit. I love them. They're amazing. Plus, you guys have an awesome dog. I think I forgot. Anyways, I'll let you share more.
And I was going to put out there, if you want help onboarding your VP of Ops, we're your guy, right? Just basically have some get into phone calls with us for a week straight, and we'll get them, no problem. I think very similarly with human capital, it's about falling under that same umbrella of where it is you're going. So we knew from the very beginning, okay, we're dealing with a clientele that might be more demanding or may have more needs and, a higher level of requirements. So it's imperative that we have someone to be able to take ownership of that. Okay, well then we're looking at, a mid-tier luxury guest experience type of role. Great, we're going to luxury hotels, right? And then we knew that's the role. We need somebody to take ownership of this level of guest experience. And it's paid incredible dividends, right? We have, I believe we're close to 300 reviews on Google. We got 4.9 stars. And that includes a random person that gave us a 1-star review because our Minty Living van got too close to them and they were, like, Minty Living. Crazy.
That's so funny.
So, at the end of the day.
Ben, I've got a question. Sorry to interrupt. So are you saying that for your future proving, like when you think about hiring somebody, you're kind of saying we're providing a luxury hotel experience, and so we're looking for people who can provide that just across the board, both operationally and internally as well? Or how do those two things connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So really for us, you probably deal with this constantly, which is the founder's dilemma, which is you have certain fires that have to get put out. You know that you're the person who's the best firefighter in the building, and yet you've got 20 other fires that you have to put together. And so
story of my life.
Yeah, exactly. No, my hair is on fire right now. This is actually a background that you can see, but it's obscuring that. So for us, we knew that guest experience was of the highest level of importance, and yet we were spending so much of our time on the resolution of ensuring that guests were having positive experiences. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to then take the next step, which by the way was around physical branding. So we're now doing a massive push around upsells inside of the physical space. We have all of these purchasable amenities that are kind of curated in these really clean and luxury-esque type ways that, by the way, have bumped our revenue upwards of 15 to 20%. So we're seeing tremendous impact, but we had to stop doing guest experience. And so again, this is a critical part of our company. Guest experience is paramount to our success, to our name brand. The film and production industry is huge on referrals, and therefore we can't just hand this to somebody. Guest experience must be handed to somebody who we know can take real ownership of these issues. Then we went searching for that person that we knew could take that role, which then freed us to focus on the physical branding component. So it really is, like Francois was talking, it's a back chaining exercise.
Yeah. I mean, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Delegation is also a difficult thing, especially when you've done it yourself. It's probably one of the hardest things. It's something I would say I only learned a few months ago, to be honest, as we're going through this hiring spree. I've always, and I found myself being a bottleneck sometimes where I'd be blocking it off because I have so many things to do. And, they're all priorities, when in fact, taking that extra step, that time to teach, find the right person, and so on to do it will pay dividends in the long run. I think one of the key books I actually read a few weeks back that really helped me formalize that and processize that was Buy Back Your Time. I don't know if you guys have read it.
I'm writing it down.
No,
Yeah,
I am about to as well. I'm like putting it in Notion right away.
Yeah, honestly, I'll just give a quick synopsis on one specific vertical of this. Is you put what makes you happy on a vertical line, what makes you money on a horizontal line. If it makes you money and it makes you happy, do it. If it makes you money and you don't like doing it, delegate it. Right. If it makes you happy, but you're not really making money, that's okay. It's personal development. It's important to do things that you like doing that don't always make you money. And if it doesn't make you happy and it doesn't make you money, then why are you doing it in the first place? and when you start formalizing it, it's just
the Eisenhower matrix, right? That's
exactly. I mean, it's just focusing on that matrix. Exactly. So anyways, that's a little interlude on some quick reading I was doing a few weeks back. So let's talk a bit more about tech stacks. I mean, this is a subject that's obviously we'll always see online and so on, but I think you guys have had a very unique and disruptive approach to the tech stack. One that I might say that some PMS fear, because you're effectively becoming your own system. Your business is your own technology. It's the amalgamation of different technology. But I mean, hey, what is to say mine is as well? I use AWS, I use Stripe, I use different tools and technologies to build Enzo Connect. So let's talk a bit more about this. And I know Sasha, my team, is going to share as well a little graph, if you guys are okay, of where that technology lies in your operations. Let's start with Ben. Share a bit more how this works. Building that future ready tech stack.
Well,
that one's Renjoy. There we go. Minty Living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will start off by saying, for us being an urban focused vacation rental manager, throughput is crucial. We have that guess again, you 2D something, right? You put something on two different axes. And when we define what we call our high performers or best outcomes, we have the best quality, i.e. somebody who's doing a good job, and throughput. And if you think about the framework of doing that in a highly physical space, you have to have a robust task management system. And so this started from a place of looking at the existing world of vacation rental management and saying, building good task management systems is hard, right? It went from Trello to Notion to all of these different ones that did that. And it literally was when ClickUp came out, end of 2021, because I was spending a lot of brain cycles on finding a good task management tool. I had this massive aha moment when it came out that this is going to be a flexible and extensible task management platform that we're going to be able to integrate with all of our systems. So you'll see kind of ClickUp all over this chart here. And so that really was the first realization. And then the second was that we live in a world where your data is really about event-driven sequences. So what do I mean by that? So if I take a simple repairs and maintenance task, Jenny wrote in and her toilet is broken. Well, now we have to go and resolve Jenny's toilet, and we want to see how Jenny feels about the job that we did. It's a very simple process, but there's probably 15 to 30 events that took place during that process, from when we got the communication to when we farmed it out to our vendor scheduler, which is one of our roles in our org chart, to when that vendor scheduler actually scheduled the vendor, to when the vendor accepted the task, to when the vendor resolved the task, to when the guest actually said, hey, Jonathan did a great job fixing my toilet, right? Well, my realization was that we don't just want that the task was done. We actually want to be measuring every single event that goes on throughout that process. And
feedback loop.
Yeah. And so, it's probably not surprising. There's nothing that does that. You have to build that event-driven architecture from scratch. And so you mentioned AWS, Francois. That was like a huge light bulb for us of we can tie all of these into event-driven architectures and then basically bifurcate our data to things that require high levels of availability, i.e. our online booking experience, which is completely bespoke, specifically geared towards extended stays. And then, of course, things that we can kind of stuff someplace and analyze later. They don't have to be highly available. And of course, that we use unstructured data formats inside of AWS that give us a high level of analytical capability. So the process was certainly one, again, know about what you're starting. I did not want to create a mom and pop vacation rental manager. I support and am a little jealous of anyone who has chosen to do that. I wanted to build an architecture and a platform that could run thousands of units. And so we've made those decisions, and I, feel a certain level of confidence that what we have put together, I've kicked the tires on a lot of different systems and people that have built things. It's pretty robust, and I'm very proud of what we put together.
100%. I'm going to dive into this a bit more. I want to share Jacob's as well. And I figured it would be good to bring someone, like, I didn't want this to be promotional. So Jacob actually does not use Enzo Connect. I'll parentheses by saying yet, who knows? But but I figured it's good to start seeing kind of how you guys think about these different systems, these different tools. So here we've got Jacob's tech stack. Thank you again, Ben, for sharing, Jacob for sharing as well. I know this can be kind of private for some property managers, but I feel like it's really helpful for everyone to see how this all connects the dots. So how about yourself, Jacob? Share a bit more about how you did this.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One comment on the privacy of this. It's not private. I am totally open about how we do things. It's so complicated and so unique to everybody's business. I do not mind sharing at all. And then second thing I would point out from what Ben said, he is 100% correct that you have to build a system that does real work in the real world. That is very different than software, right? Like software is an important part of that, but then you got to talk about, what's his name, Ben? You said Jonathan and Jenny or whatever. Jonathan is a real guy. You got to like actually manage a relationship with a real human, with a vendor. And that's a whole other art that can't really be captured within the tech stack. How do you even get Jonathan to use ClickUp, to like accept jobs in the first place, right? Like you have to persuade them that you're going to be giving them enough work, that you're somebody they want to work with. Like there's a whole bunch of things going on outside of the tech stack. I just want to point that out real quick. Because I think a lot of software people jump into, not that this is you, Ben, I'm just saying a lot of software people jump into short-term rental property management, think, oh, it's just putting tech together. And so I'll have a great service. And the reality is, well, like, no, you've got boots on the ground every day. Dozens and dozens of properties have issues every day. And you have to actually have people running around solving them. So anyway, I just want to make that comment. As far as tech stack goes, we honestly have been, I would not say the model to follow in so much as we did not do our due diligence, like Ben had mentioned earlier. When up front, when we were selecting tools, we weren't really very clear about how we were going to put everything together. And so we've switched from tool to tool to tool, like really rapid succession. And yes, it costs months of time and it costs gobs of money. But I think looking back, one of the things we've concluded is that data is king. And while the PMSs might fear that they're no longer the single source of truth of these kind of forward-thinking property managers, I do think PMSs still have a big role to play, and we can talk about that in detail if you like. But our crucial insight is we need to control our data, and we need to control our data in an industry-agnostic tool. What we found is within vacation rental managers, if we used a vacation rental management tool, let's say a PMS, as our main database, we were hamstrung in terms of the innovation that we could then implement across the portfolio by waiting for something within our industry to develop. And so by removing our data into a platform agnostic, a much more widely accepted multi-industry tool, it gives us access to a lot more innovation that we can then plug and play. In Ben's case, ClickUp. ClickUp is not a vacation rental management tool by any means, right? It's a task management tool. And by having control of his data, he's actually able to use ClickUp. Whereas if you're in your PMS, let's say Guesty, because that's what I know, Guesty has tasks and it is terrible for doing tasks, right? Like it is useless for us. No offense, Guesty, but it is useless. And so we have to have our data somewhere else so that we can have tasks coming off of a different database. I can go into a lot of detail here, but that's the main gist that we discovered.
No, but this is super helpful, and I think this is a perfect segue around data and ownership of that data. I think we've faced a similar problem at Enzo, where sometimes you look at software as a way of solving a problem before actually diving in and figuring out how to solve that problem. And I'm going to personally kind of be evil on one company called Tatango that have put me in a bit of a pickle because I'm stuck paying them for the next 8 months and have received absolutely no help whatsoever. It's supposed to be an onboarding system. They couldn't even onboard me if their life depended on it. And why? Because we figured, okay, well, let's improve our onboarding process and get this software. And that was the wrong approach. The right approach is to figure out what is the problems I'm facing, whether it's onboarding or whether it's product management, whether it's whatever that might be, and how can I streamline that? Where are these issues? And how can I develop almost like a decision tree of different processes, and then see what are those steps that technology can help automate. I know, Ben, you've extended a lot of our webhook functionality. I did a quick demo bite, and I'm going to point this one out because that one's my favorite. Like, you are the reason why we've kept developing webhooks, and to this day, it has saved us on so many sales.
Feature request.
I love it.
Feature request. Feature request. It's like, Ben, stop sending feature requests.
No, but it's brilliant. So Enzo Connect, one of our USP, was building out this, what we call experience system. It's a framework that allows us to say, if this, then that. And I was very personally inspired by IFTT, this company called If This Then That, that when I was in college, I was connecting my smart lamps to like my Alexa so that I could do cool things where, like, if I did this, boom, the lights and disco would turn on, like just
oh my God.
Random things. Yeah. That's a story for another webinar.
That image is going to live in my brain.
Yeah.
By the way, for the next week at least.
That's so funny.
Oh my.
That's not what I was doing in college.
But I was just having fun with the system, right? And so we were very inspired by it. But what we saw were people such as yourself, Jacob, and Ben being able to then extract data from our system and put it elsewhere. And it feels like we lose defensibility as a company in the industry because we're now sending information away. We're losing that data to a certain extent. But I think in today's day and age, it's not about who is controlling that data as much as it is who is connecting that data with all of the right systems.
Absolutely.
Because there is no, all-in-one that does absolutely everything perfectly.
I think you bring up a really good point, and this certainly harkens to the original comments about the breadth of function that we have to deal with as a vacation rental manager.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we originally saw, we saw kind of these two different strategies that software companies took. In the beginning, it was about panacea, right? We had our tracks and our streamlines, and I would say Guesty is essentially, the last of a soon to be extinct breed because you can't build panaceas, right? At the end of the day, Google tried to build a panacea with its Google Workspace and its Google Suite with email and chat and Drive. And it's like, if Google can't build it, no one can build it. Like, you cannot build it. It is far too expensive and it's impossible to do well. And then we had the second strategy, which is to say, okay, then we're going to create incredibly isolated bits of functionality. Okay, I'm just going to control locks. Okay, I'm just going to be communication. Okay, I'm just going to be booking engine. And I think what we see there is the amount of brain damage that owners and CEOs have to go through and try to figure out how to hook this stuff up. Because it's like, well, wait a second, if all you do is locks, how am I communicating that to the guest that then has to be in our PMS that, and now all of a sudden you're stuck with this spaghetti that you've got to figure out how to glue the ends together. And so I'm not trying to in any way, obviously, promote Enzo Connect, but I love the reason that we were so ecstatic to jump on with you guys in so quickly was because you identified, it's like you took this decision matrix of functionality and said, well, wait a second. Locks is extremely close to communication, which is extremely close to user app, which is very close to upsells, but right. And you essentially identified these functional edges of this kind of polygon of use and value and utility.
Yeah.
And you said, great, we're going to build an app that touches all of that. And I personally believe that is going to be the next phase that we see with technology companies, as opposed to saying, okay, great, we just do omni-channel communication or we just do locks. It's actually going to be looking at these
Use case.
functional edges that touch and say, well, wait a second, we're going to own this whole thing. Because if now I can take one company that has 7 functional edges here, 7 functional edges here, now I only need 3 apps as opposed to this, absolutely staggering diagram that you showed, which is like, oh my God, Minty Living uses 15 apps. And it's like, yeah, we use 15 apps. It's ridiculous.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, is there anything you want to add to that, Jacob? I mean, I feel like you might have the same experience as well, going through these different providers and figuring out what pieces puzzle together.
Totally. I love the imagery of like gluing noodles together. I think that's hilarious. What I would say is what you just described though to me, like in my mind, you said polygon, and I was thinking it's like a neural network of connections between all these different things that are related, but somewhat different. Like the locks, you talk about locks going to guests, but locks also go to vendors. They go to employees. They go to owners, right? Like there's a lot of people involved in touching locks that have to be tied to your work order process, tied to your messaging to guests, tied to, so like it's, and each, what are these called? Francois, help me. When you've got one point that connects to a bunch of different nodes. You've got all these nodes. Yeah. You've got all these nodes that are interconnected and related to each other. So what Ben was talking about is this small brain with all these different nodes that are related to an outcome, which is a guest getting a code to enter a property or whatever. But you're going to have other little brains kind of all over the place that are going to be more functionality. And then you're still going to have at the heart of all of that, your data. And your data has to be accessible by a lot of tools. And a lot of tools have to be able to deal with a lot of different kinds of data. So and this is actually why we use Guesty. I agree that Guesty has tried to be a panacea. But what we actually love about it is that their API is so open.
Yeah.
So open.
And super clean.
Clean. It's clean. It's open. It's easy for us to use. And a lot of people like to integrate with Guesty because it's so easy. And so that gives us access to a lot of innovation. They've become a really expensive integration hub for us to some degree.
It literally is. I mean, I call Guesty our booking engine, right? And that really is all it's just a booking engine. All of our property data, all of our everything else lives someplace else, but it's a booking engine with incredible API functionality. And for us, API functionality was paramount during the diligence process.
100%. And I have to stay impartial, obviously, with regards to PMSs being our partners and so on, but I can say that Guesty is in the top 3, and I won't say which ones are, et cetera, from an integration and API perspective, specifically because they use the concept of webhooks. I mean, I've seen certain systems in this industry send data via carrier pigeons, and it's getting pretty annoying when you're trying to get real-time reservations, because pigeons don't fly that fast. So, but it's so looking at all of these tools, and obviously everyone's got a different approach. And I think, going back a bit earlier to some of the subject of like, it's very different if you have 5 units and you're looking to get to 15 and that's your goal, versus if you're looking to get to 150, or if you're looking to get to 1,000. Like, these are going to be different challenges. And I want to actually almost go the antithesis of Enzo, in the sense that, like, if you're not looking to scale and you're looking to just have this small boutique shop business that you're happy with, you might not need to think about all of these different processes and systems, because your time can still be quantified within that amount of work that is demanded by a certain number of listings. And I don't know where these sort of barriers are, but if you are looking to scale and you are looking to grow as fast as both Jacob and Ben has, thinking about these connections between different tools and how data is being sent is what's going to allow you to get to the next stage in 2024. Or be an average property manager that has a much slower growth rate. So on that note, we've talked a lot about data connection. And recently I did a quick demo bite on the concept of a webhook. So I'm going to give a little brief just so everyone knows what a webhook is. And then we're talking a bit more about data warehousing. So webhooks, think of it this way. I had an analogy on one of them, which was you order a pizza. And instead of calling the guy every 5 minutes to be like, is it there yet? Is it there yet? Is it there yet? You're going to wait for them to just ring your doorbell. And once they ring your doorbell, that'll be the signal for you to know, okay, the pizza's ready. I'm going to go get it. That's kind of the same concept as a webhook. It's an efficiency between data being transferred from one system to the next. It's basically instant, and it's waiting on a specific event or trigger to send that information somewhere else. Now, I mentioned laughingly that Ben has quite a few webhooks set up. So let's talk a bit more about webhooks, about data transfer from one system to the next, and about data warehousing. Who wants to start? Ben, go for it.
I mean, look, for us, I think, Francois, I love your analogy of, is he at my door yet? Is he at my door yet? Is he at my door? Just, he's going to ring your doorbell. Like, oh, well, that's great. And it's amazing that we literally had 15 years of building technology where that's what we did, right? We would just poll the server and be like, anything different? Is anything different? Is anything different? And it really is kind of this advent of webhooks that I think is so natural in the way that we think about vacation rental management. Like you said, this concept of back chaining, right? When I kind of describe that physical process, it's about these events that take place. It's about things that occur. And it's once that thing occurs, okay, let's save that data. Let's now begin a sequence of another set of different different events to take place. So we focused on really ensuring that we were collecting everything. And I think, again, back to what do you want to be when you grow up? Do not do this if you're trying to be a 50-unit, very profitable vacation rental manager. I think there you're looking for panacea. You're looking for as few technology solutions as possible. And you're looking to maximize your profitability. You're going to measure process optimization via management, via human capital, by having someone who's a good manager of the people that are doing the tasks. And that's going to be how you're going to create the best possible outcomes. In our situation, it's about being able to measure, well, how are all of these functions performing across geographic centers? So I knew as soon as we started this, I don't just want to be in Atlanta. I want to be in 10 different cities. So we want to be able to measure, well, wait a second, how long does it take a vendor scheduler in Atlanta to schedule these different types of tasks versus a vendor scheduler in Austin? So again, that event-driven architecture and the ability to measure that specific chunk of the process becomes crucial when you look at these different geographies. The second piece, I think, is figuring out how to get applications to actually give you that data. Francois, what you guys have done is wonderful, where you're like, hey, here's a webhook. That's actually
leave me alone, Ben. Here's your webhooks.
Stop calling it. So that I would say has certainly become more standard, which is great. It is not necessarily ubiquitously available. So you'll find plenty of systems. Of course, when you go into an app or any of these different apps, the way that they are rendering that data to you is not the same thing as their API. I mean, if best technology, they say we like to eat our own dog food, i.e. we use our own API to, build your app. That's not usually the case. And so a lot of these have very, very scaled down, dumbed down APIs where you're like, I can see the data right there. Why can't I get this via an endpoint? And you have to go through that process. So again, it's really about understanding where you're going. I think what Jacob spoke about with using available tools to get you a global view, not necessarily the nuance of, well, when did this person respond to the vendor request? And when did this person send out their review form of how well the maintenance tech did? But certainly creating a global view of your data is an incredibly, incredibly valuable thing. And I think Jacob can talk about the tools that are there to do that.
100%. Yeah, Jacob, share a bit more, because I know you guys use Airtable as well. And is that the place where you centralize all of this information?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are comfortable, I'd be willing to share it. I don't know if I can share my screen here.
I don't. I think there's a share button. You should have the permission to share a bit more. Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Let's go right into it.
My lobbyist tabs. We have a big bill in Colorado right now to increase taxes on short-term rentals. So I've been working hard on fighting them off.
Fair enough.
Share screen. Here we go. Cool. Okay, so then the reason why I'm going to show this is because we use it for a lot of things. This isn't just like data about, let's say, a property. So you can control proper data in here, of course, but we actually have our whole CRM in here, our whole project management system in here, our vendors in here, bedroom breakdowns.
replacement items are processed for, contesting reviews, for contesting, damage to, claims that we have across the tool. So we use Airtable for literally everything, including our marketing campaigns and all of that. And what this does by having all your data kind of in a centralized data, and I'm not going to go through all this. There's quite a bit of data. I don't have it all visible here, but what you can do is you can actually visualize it with an interface that people use. So you have your sales, you have your properties, your onboarding, tasks, finance, housekeeping, and then our dashboards, et cetera. So all of this stuff is in one location that we can use basically across the entire company. And it's extremely useful. What we actually do with Guesty, because we do have a lot of stuff happening within our PMS, we actually have a lot of push-pull relationships between our database and Guesty. And we actually denote those in our database so everybody knows how the data is flowing between our property data or our guest data or our guidebook data or whatever, how that's flowing into our PMS or other tools. And so to the question about like data warehousing, what you really want to do is have a SQL database and really have complete control over how your data is used. Unfortunately, that's very expensive because then you have to have an administrator, you have to have somebody who knows what they're doing. And we found that was just not possible for us at this point in time. So we found a data visualization tool, which I think is pretty useful for Airtable. I do think one thing though, like moving forward, Francois, I do think what we're talking about actually may even go away with the data thing, because what generative AI and AI in general is really, really good at doing is taking unstructured data and creating structure out of it. And that's basically all we're doing by building a database. We're trying to capture physical, real world, unstructured data. It's not digitized. Like, hey, where's the electrical panel? That's not a digital piece of data. We have to digitize that information, right? But in the future, I think there's going to be tools that will actually do that on your behalf. You literally don't have to build any kind of structure with your data. You just scan a video 360 of the room, and then the AI will automatically pull all that data into a hub, and then you can just query it, and you'll have all the information you need. And not just you, of course, but any other application can query your database, and then it'll have the answer. And so all of a sudden, you don't even need to structure your data in the way that we are currently. And so one of our thoughts, and that's maybe far out, but one of our thoughts around this is have your data, historical data, in one location, so that it's easy to implement some kind of AI engine for internal use and potentially even external use to query that data. And then even in the future, there may be a tool that does all kind of that database building on your behalf. So that's kind of how we think about it. Yeah.
100%. No, I mean, I've been looking at a white label of a Copilot actually for 2024. I'm not going to share all the roadmap plans. Join our webinar in January for that. But nice. and what you just mentioned, Jacob, on that front of, kind of like having this information and AI being able to look at unstructured data and providing these insights, I agree with it so much as to say that the data still somewhat needs to be structured to reduce hallucinations. The more structure you can provide to that information, the more accuracy you're going to create with the engine, the more normalization you have within that data as well. And I'm talking very basic, whether it's a string value, an integer value, or if it's even where it's located with respects to, is it this information with regards to a guest, with regards to a property, with regards to a location. All of that is going to improve accuracy in creating these kinds of copilots where you don't necessarily need to build all of these dashboards. You could literally just have a chat box and ask a question and get the information that you want. I mean, it's almost like the shift between, but this is a whole different, we'll have to have a webinar part 2 with you guys, because I feel like we could go on for ages, if anything, but the shift from like searching on Google versus searching on ChatGPT, for example, like that mental shift that is already kind of happening. I look up for a recipe of something and I get a bunch of ads and videos and I'm just looking for the ingredients. Whereas I go on ChatGPT, it gives me bullet points, call it a day, right? So that there's a shift happening of how we're searching information, how we're visualizing it, but ultimately being in control of your data and having it structured the way you see it will allow you to rip and replace best-in-class technologies the way you see fit.
The guy who actually got me into software engineering, I'm too damn old, but like decades ago, told me, and I kid you not, he said to me, the right number of search results for a Google search is 1. And this is like 15 years ago. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. There's no way that's right. I was like, that's not right. That just doesn't make any sense. And ChatGPT came out, and I wrote him, and I was like,
you're right.
Right.
I know
Like,
the recipe.
one, like, and I couldn't conceptualize it. And it's just, that's what we've done, right? We made the correct number of search results.
Yeah. But again, structuring that information is going to allow you to reduce those kinds of issues that you might still see with generative AI, because it's just human cognition. It's not yet, general purpose AI.
Q star. Sorry. Q star.
Exactly. So, I mean, no, this is probably one of the most interesting topics. And I think it's one where it's technical enough that not everyone in the industry has dived into it, but it's happening. And the more I would say the more modern property managers are taking on that approach of rethinking systems. And you know, as a scaling property manager, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob and Ben, but you guys almost also have departments in a way, right? So the concept of the all-in-one trumps best-in-class debate, and I think it's a good balance, if anything, between the two. If you have different departments, like I always say, my development team doesn't use the same tools as my sales team. They don't program on HubSpot. It just doesn't work. So like there's this idea of how you pick these different systems and then connect them to solve your problems. Now, this has been a fantastic conversation. We're probably 6 minutes out, which is a bit less time than I expected for Q&A. So we're going to dive right into Q&A if you guys are cool with it. Guys, there's a little chat function on the right-hand side. You can post a question in here, or actually there's a questions one. I don't see any questions yet. Feel free to post any questions, and we're going to jump in order of those questions. Is there anything?
One
yeah,
piece
in the
that
meantime,
while people are bringing the questions, that I'll certainly mention that we deal with tremendously. You talk about these different functions and getting them to talk with us is developers and front office. I mean, our developers hate that we use ClickUp. They hate it because generally speaking, as an API, it's not meant to do what we are doing to it. Right. I mean, we're taking an elephant, and like squishing it into like a thimble and like shoving it, like it's not meant to do this stuff. And so the constant, attention between ensuring that front office understands what's going on which is another reason that we love AWS with their state machines, their step functions. You create these very clear, what are called DAGs, right? Directed asynchronous graphs, right? Where you can show the workflow. You can show the workflow very, very clearly. So we love that because now we can paste the workflow inside all of our docs that we have, our wikis around all the different
see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we took on that approach as well with different systems that we wanted to build. I think you had different rules that you wanted to create for verification parameters and when to release codes for smart locks and so on, and just kind of create all that workflow. It makes perfect sense. Jacob, how about yourself? I don't see any questions so far. Either we just flew above everyone's head. Oh no, we do have one question. Perfect timing. Dean McLukey, if I'm pronouncing it well. If I'm not, I apologize in advance. Common question that we get from owners and estate managers is, how do you screen your guests? How do you guys go about screening guests and reducing the risk of damage or violation of house estate rules? Who wants to take on that response?
We've spent, a ton.
Well, I know the workflows
on this. I mean, Atlanta is sadly one of the highest rates of fraudulent activity.
And you have squatter rules there too, right?
Squatter rules. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And so we've got these kind of mid-tier luxury units in an area where, most of the time we're able to succeed, and you have kind of some that slip through the net and then you learn. So what I would say is, and this, again, not intentional to have a plug here, but Enzo has given us the ability to create very nuanced logic around different levels of screening. So, for example, even though people from Airbnb don't like hearing it, if you're checking into our unit from Airbnb, you still have to send us a candid selfie. You still have to send us your ID. And I know that your identity has been verified on Airbnb, but nonetheless, we have had people whose Airbnb credentials have been stolen by somebody else. Yeah. And so I think there probably needs to be a roundtable about this, because at the end of the day, the whole industry is taken down a rung when these sorts of things happen, when people's homes or estates are damaged. And we really need to share best practices. But these types of tools that give you the ability, again, this if this then that type of sequencing is absolutely critical. You have to be able to distinguish based on what channel they're coming from, how long it has been since the distance between when they book and when they want to check in, right? So the booking lead time, the duration of their stay, and on and on, and also property type, right? So we get different types of risk attributes. If it's a single family home, than if it's a downstairs unit in a duplex.
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate the plug, Ben, but I would just add, it's not us actually doing the verification. It's our partners at AutoHost that are doing the verification. We're just that glue that connects it within the guest experience and allows for these kinds of different rules, because it's also finding the balance, right, between the intensive, let me get every information about you, your background checks, everything. You might not need to go that direction and create friction for certain guests that you might do for other guests based on these different parameters. Right. So Jacob, how about yourself? What do you see on that front?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of similar stuff to Ben mentioned. So for screening, we kind of start with the risk profile first. So a bunch of variables. How does that affect the riskiness of this particular booking? And based off of the risk level of that booking, then we do certain parameters for following up. Like you have to give us a photo of your ID. You have to give us a photo of your credit card that you're using. If it's not Airbnb or some other channel that already has that information. We typically will require, them sign property agreements, like rental agreements almost. And so, but the key thing I think is, and Ben kind of mentioned this, I don't know if everybody caught that, but he was talking about how you got your nets and then sometimes people slip through and you learn. And that's how you improve your screening. The when you learn part is the painful thing. And you use that to understand the real risk. Cause you don't really know, you can learn a lot from other people. But again, I want to go back to everybody's vacation rental business is very different. Being in Atlanta, you have the highest rate of fraud. You have very particular things. You're looking out for squatters. We don't really look out for squatters so much as fraudulent or stolen credit cards. That's a bigger problem for us. People are just paying for stays, and then actually trying to get reimbursements through booking channels rather than actually staying at the property. So we have kind of a little bit of a different problem, but ultimately, you have to understand your specific risk profiles for your specific properties, and you need a screen based off of that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'll give one other tip that I've seen work really well. We call it Flex, and it's providing the flexibility of a damage waiver or safety deposit to your guests. This is a huge revenue generating opportunity where you can effectively self-insure your property, all while creating that flexibility where guests aren't forced to pay extra fees. They can still choose to leave a safety deposit. Do some 3DS Secure on the credit card, make sure it's real, get that deposit, place a hold on it, or charge the card. I would prefer placing a hold than charging the card because there's fees associated to that with Stripe and all that jazz. So there's different techniques you can put in place. There is no perfect 100% successful technique for screening guests and reducing the risk of damage. There will always be bad actors. But again, you've got two amazing property managers here on stage with us that have gone through these experiences and have implemented different systems. On that note, it is 12:01. I'm a big believer of buying back people's time after reading that Buy Back Your Time book. So we're gonna close that webinar in the next couple of minutes here. Really appreciate, Jacob, your time. Ben, you know it already. I think we need to do a part 2 of this subject and maybe dive into a bit more. We're gonna do a little poll for people who have had the chance to listen and see what specifically they'd like to hear more about. So we'll be sending you guys a note on that. Thank you so much. I guess last question, how do we get in touch with you guys? Jacob, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Ben, same thing?
Great question. Pretty easy, jacob@renjoy.com. JACOB@renjoy.com.
We'll put that contact information in the show notes. And how about yourself, Ben?
I'm just Ben, BEN, @mintyliving.com.
Love it. Easy. And my name is Francois. Again, your host today for this webinar. Super excited, super happy. Ben, Jacob, really appreciate your time.
Thank
Catch
you
you on the next one.
Thank you.